1 plus 1 equals 2 in every mathematical equation I've ever seen, right? It's the simplest of things that a 2-year-old can tell you, maybe a 1-year-old. 1 plus 1 equals 2. But the right ones can equal 10 times. 1 plus the right one can equal a 10 times output. That is where you get exponential results. So 1 plus 1 equals 10 times, 20 times, 40 times.
Chapter 8, and we really are now getting into the nitty-gritty, right? We're really thinking, we're putting on another hat, if you will, right? We're not necessarily talking about relationships, we're really talking about systems and processes, something you're very good at. So let me ask you, how did you develop your system for systematizing and scaling your business, as well as other processes that are the foundation of the companies you have?
Systems always come from problems. So a problem creates the need for a system. And, I have high energy, maybe a little bit of ADHD. The reality is this: discipline will equal freedom. And the more disciplined I have been in my life, my career, my schedule, the more success comes from that. So the more process driven I've become, the better the system becomes, the better the output, the better the result. And all you're doing is fine tuning that system over and over again. It's always something that could be a little bit better. I mean, I've done events for 20 years, and one is the wine festival, which we've talked about in the book. And I can tell you, I've never ever walked around that wine festival site with 8,000 people and not thought of all the things that I would do differently or better. That's how my brain works. Sometimes that is the entrepreneur's brain, that is the creativity and the curiosity. Sometimes it's also the very thing that makes us a little broken, in that we're always seeing how we can change or fix something. And in a business in general, to create the right systems, you have to create systems. If you want value, those systems have to be beyond you. I talk in one of the chapters, I talk about a God versus a prophet. Okay, it's a great analogy. Again, another thing I heard on the stage. It's not my idea. It's one that I've stolen. But here's the key component. If you are a God in your business, you are the one that everything runs through. It's a lot less valuable, because when you're no longer there, how does it run without you? How does it function? But if you become a prophet, you become one of the people that helps make this business great. And the systems and processes become what you lean on, not the person. It becomes so much more powerful, so much more valuable. And so a lot of the steps inside of these chapters are designed to help you create systems that will be more successful. And when we designed our process for helping a financial advisor, as this example shows in the book, step away from their business, we identified the processes and systems that are mandatory for success. Of course, as mentioned before, they also require making sure they have a rich life and their impact goes beyond the business. That's legacy. Now we step into execution, and there's actually steps and processes of which you go through. But number one is, if you think you're selling your business as the God, it's going to be very difficult for someone else to come in and be you. They're never going to be you. They can't be you. They can be a version of what's important to you. They can symbolize your core values, your principles. They can replicate your conversation points, but they may not be able to connect the way you connected. Whatever it is, you're going to have to find those variables that are a little different and embrace them, because you can't have change without a little bit of that uncomfortability.
So you walk into a situation, like you mentioned the Chesapeake Wine Festival. You walk in and you maybe take in the sights and the people, and you're proud, as you should be. But then you're thinking, how can I make this better for next year? Right? That's just what your brain does. That's what you had just said. How does your personality work into how you are when you're seeing a situation like that. And if you have someone else that thinks differently, how would they see that situation, that same situation that you just mentioned?
Yeah.
We're talking about DISC and personality and how you approach.
So the model of human behavior and personalities is extremely interesting. I don't believe that your personality isn't something that that you can't grow with and learn from. I do believe there's a foundational structure to how we are all set up, and you tend to be a people person or a task individual, right? And we tend to be focused on the extroverted person or introverted, and you can box people into these categories. But here's the key: if you pair the wrong two people together, it can be a complete disaster. If you pair the right two people together, it can be enormously successful. An example I would say is this: I had a conversation with the person that I'm looking to do some collaboration with the other day, and we were texting, and he was saying something that was really exciting, and I was responding, and I said, 1 + 1 = 2 in every mathematical equation I've ever seen, right? It's the simplest of things that a 2-year-old can tell you, maybe a 1-year-old. 1 + 1 = 2. But the right ones can equal 10 times. 1 plus the right one can equal a 10 times output. That is where you get exponential results. So 1 + 1 = 10 times, 20 times, 40 times. That is enormous. And when you're doing this in business, it's the same thing. If I pair two analytical people together who think that being right is the most important thing, and it's just, and it's the way it's always been done, and this is the fact, and man, it is so hard to get them to be on the same page. But if I have a people person with a task person, and there's maybe an analytical team behind that's helping to guide the numbers, but the people person is the one that's actually talking to the analytical every day, they both feel heard. They both feel successful. Now take someone who has a little bit of all those skills together, and they're able to team up with someone just like them, but who leans in one direction. That's where you start to get the 1 + 1 × 10. Like, that's where the 10 times comes in. And so, we've always used DISC in our business. I think it's a great assessment. There's so many great personality assessments. A friend of mine from Genius Network, Ben Hardy, wrote a book called Personality Isn't Permanent. And he could tell you that you might be this as a foundation, but it doesn't mean you're going to stay that. I love to win. I absolutely love to win. But if I get so focused in a dominant state of winning, I actually can't even see when a loss was a win. See, that's something that you have to do as you get older. You learn that winning all the time doesn't allow you to actually grow. And so these are things that, yes, on a basic personality assessment, it might show that I really like these things. I love connection. I love to make sure I understand you. I love to be able to, speak and see you enjoy what we're actually creating. But it doesn't mean you're not just because you're not smiling and nodding and moving along with me. There's many people who process. And that makes us stronger individuals. So in our company, we would do an entire DISC assessment on every single employee, which we do every year, and every new person. And then we chart everybody. And when someone new comes into the fold, or I have a consulting relationship of any kind, whether we're buying the practice or whether we're consulting on the practice or we're consulting on a business, I'm going to do a personality assessment to identify who on the team will help that person feel most heard. Remember, I'm not describing what most people think personality assessments are all about, themselves. That's less important to me. What's most important is that you feel heard. And in order for you to feel heard, you have to be teamed up sometimes with the right mix, the right character, the right personality. And so it's not always perfect, but it definitely can help. And it's a good question.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because together that's how you create the systems and the processes that are the foundation of your business, right? So together it makes it possible to have a business that runs smoothly and is sellable.
That's exactly right. I think the other thing is that when you're transitioning in a business, okay, you're selling a business, the word transition is uncomfortable. We've said this before. Uncomfortable moments breed uncomfortable relationships at times. You know, if you're going through a really tough time at work and you come home and you're a little on edge, you know, your spouse is going to feel it. And maybe you're great at dealing with it, maybe you're not. Maybe it's an outlet, but you have to figure out what that's like, and you have to identify and know that it's coming, right? So in a transition like this, I know it's coming. So I need to make sure that that person fully feels like we're working to help them guide through it. But when we know that it's going to be challenging, there have been times where, you know, as a results oriented individual, I am motivation and coaching first. That's how every relationship starts off that way. But if we get down to the nitty gritty, I'm not afraid to get into the results. And the bottom line is this, right? Well, if you're with two bottom line people and someone's trying to sell their practice and they're constantly in a tough spot, it really serves well to have someone on our team work directly with that other results-oriented individual to make sure they feel heard and they're getting the things done they need. It does no good for two people to be bullheaded and hitting each other on the forehead all the time to get something accomplished. That's going to waste both time and energy, and most of all, money. So the value of your practice could again be exponentially enhanced or grown with the right 1+1. The right person, the right personality, the right mix, the chemistry, the relationship, all that can elevate it.
This chapter has a very detailed timeline of what to do when you are choosing your exit strategy, what to do next, when. Can you explain some of the highlights? What people really need to be thinking about if this is where they are?
Yeah, so obviously, it starts with, again, the first chapter, emotionally having a high IQ, knowing that you're going to be able to handle these things, okay? Very, very, very important. Next, you go into the execution standpoint. The execution standpoint is from everything from hiring the right team to making sure that you've had a valid valuation. You know, do you actually know what you're selling? So many times, this is crazy, and I've sat in this office so many times where a business owner says, well, my business is worth X. And I'm like, well, where did you get that number? And like, I just know. I know. And you're like, do you? Do you really know? Because until you get a valuation or you understand your industry, you may not really know the value. Now, it doesn't mean that a drunken sailor is not going to come out and just pay top dollar for your practice or your business just because they like you or they think there's a lot of potential. It's possible, but the reality is the more prepared you are, the better your team. Do you have the right CPA? Do you have the right advisor? Do you have the right, lawyer and accountant team? Do you have all of the pieces in place to make sure that as you make this decision, you're not doing it alone, logically alone? And then do you have the right emotional backup? These are all the things. And then it just guides you through the steps. And really the steps are great to use for any business. They're not just a financial advisory practice. They're really any business. You can make it your own. I've read so many real estate books in my life that are based on the real estate industry, that are revolving around the real estate industry. I don't sell real estate. I buy it, and I learn a ton from those books that are about that industry. I often find when I go to huge events and I'm networking and I'm learning about other businesses, I gain my best ideas from things that are secondhand nature, easy, mundane, boring in one industry that is enlightening to another. Something that you do in the education field could be absolutely amazingly executed and implemented in my business. But I wouldn't know until I opened my brain to look at that. And so having the right team in place and then going through the actual steps that we laid out to make sure that you're looking at all the right things. Are your practices aligned? this is another thing. It's not about the money and only the money. Yes, you want to get top dollar. Valuation's key. But if you're making it all about the money and you never made your career all about the money, you're failing. The other thing, when it's all about the money, I can't tell you how many times people say to us when we're talking to them about potentially selling their business, why don't we talk about numbers first and then we'll get to the other parts? And I remind them, being a financial advisor, you come into my office, if I go, let's talk all about the numbers first and then I'll get to know you and find out what's really important to you. That's the opposite of what I've been practicing for 20 years. It's the opposite of what 90% of them have been practicing for 20 years. But when it comes to selling their business, selling their house, you ever brought a real estate agent in and you're going to sell your house? You're like, just tell me what my house can go for. Well, tell me about the good highlights of the house. Is there a Rembrandt in the attic? What are the things that matter? Understand what's most important. Where are you moving? When do you need to be out? What's your timeline? Do we have to sell quickly? Do we have to sell over time? Is it something where you want to step down out of the house over a certain amount of time? Let's get it ready first. Do we want to sell as is? There's so many things that you have to identify. The business is no different. The business is no different. What's your timeline? Do you want to get out immediately? Do you want to wait? That affects price. All these things that are human are most important. And so you can go through the checklist. You can read great stuff by FP Transitions and all kinds of stuff in our industry that are books written directly about the execution. And they're great. But if you're not mentally ready and you're not focused on finding the right relationship, the right partnership, you're failing. And you're selling your practice for less than it could be worth. And the impact of that practice, that business, that anything is going to be lessened. The legacy is going to be lessened. And those are some of the things that we try to help focus on. The human side of the business is always going to be extremely important.
It's interesting the things that you do to grow the business, right? You're laser focused on your customers. You are doing everything you can to please your clients. That kind of you forget as you're going into that next thing, right? You're more transactional when you are trying to sell your business or go on to that next move that you're going to make. And it just became evident as you were talking about that the things that you do to grow the business are the things you need to remember as you are moving on to the next thing. But you forget that because you're like, I'm done, I'm getting ready, and I'm moving on.
Yeah, financial advisors are amazing. And they've helped people transition in life's biggest challenges and biggest moments. And sometimes they forget that they have to do that for themselves. They have to financially plan and lay out a vision for themselves. And if you're not thinking about it, how many times are you sitting across your desk telling that particular client that they need to be thinking of these things now because it'll only be tomorrow and it will happen, and you're not doing the very same thing. And so we try to help them, no matter what stage they're in, be more prepared. The older I've got in business, the more you hear success stories. A great business should always be packaged and positioned to sell. A great business should always be packaged and positioned to sell. Why? Because you never know what's going to happen. You never know if you get sick and you need to exit. You never know if your family's priorities shift, if you have to move. I mean, anything could happen. What if another business opportunity comes up and this business is no longer being served the way you want it to be? These are all things that people have come into our office and talked about. But if it's packaged and positioned and ready, and it's always at high value, top dollar, you're going to have the money stuff. The other point to your statement is awesome, and it's money clouds everything. Money itself is an empty transaction. The minute you're given green bills in your hand, it feels good for a moment, but until you use it for something, it's useless. And then the more it accumulates in your bank account, the more useless it becomes. Look at every major, millionaire, billionaire you can think of. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jay-Z, okay? Warren Buffett. They all dress bland, boring, regular. They don't flash anymore. Jay-Z used to wear all the stuff, and today, as a billionaire, he doesn't do that. Money changes people in a pretty drastic way, but if you let it change you to be transactional, you're going to miss the very great value and legacy that you're trying to get out of this business, out of the sale, out of the next chapter. Because you can't be focused on money and really see the peripheral. If all you're focused on is on money, if your whole focus is on money, the peripheral becomes difficult to see. And the peripheral is where the value is. It's where the relationship is. It's where your people are. It's where your staff is, where your clients are. I'm not selling a business if I'm selling a business. I'm trying to make sure my team is in the best possible position they can be in. I'm trying to make sure my clients are going to be served better than I could have served them. Like, that's what you have to be thinking about. And if you're thinking like that, then you're thinking peripherally, and you're looking at the relationship of the team you're doing business with. You're not looking at where you live. What do they look like you? Do they act like you? Are they exactly like you? Like, are they going to pay you the most money? There's a lot of people that'll pay you a lot of money and destroy your business.